Welcome, you 7,000 amazing subscribers. And look how many of you there are in the chat. Do you know what? It's been a tough week this week. And to see so many familiar faces in the chat and some new ones too, it's really put a smile on my face. Welcome to a parental advisory explicit content live stream with the legend that is Chip Harris in our newly decorated studio. Do let me know what you think in the chat. Improvement? Maybe not. Like it, don't like it, please let me know. But whether you're watching live or on the replay, a massive welcome and an even bigger thank you for giving up your time to engage with our content. And as always, we're streaming live with a chance for you, our audience, to ask us anything throughout, with the focus today on hacking critical infrastructure. But before we begin, for those that are new to the channel, my name's Simon. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community. And by sharing stories and best practices over the last few months, it's led to over 100,000 views of our content here on YouTube by you, our amazing subscribers. And I'm very excited to announce, as of last week, we have a new channel sponsor in the amazing Rapid7. Our organizations have great synergy, and we're excited to see how we can serve the wider security community in 2023 and beyond. Going to put a little QR code up there for you. That's a link to their website, their fundamentals page, which has some amazing free resources on cloud security, vulnerability risk management, AppSec, detection and response, and so much more. So watch this space for new events and more details coming soon. And while we're on that, a special shout out to all our existing channel members. A massive thank you for your support. And of course, if anyone in the audience watching would like to support the community or maybe buy me a cheeky decaf coffee, please click that join button with 3 levels of membership available. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So time for the show and to discover why Chip is wearing the coolest helmet in the world. Let's bring him on. If I can find the video, happens every week. Here we go. Here he is.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know why the chat's disappeared. It's just sort of vanished. I'm having a few blip outs with the technology today. Going to blame it on that very special helmet you're wearing, I think, Chip.
I have nothing to do with this. For once. For once, it's not me.
So look, great to speak to you as always. For those that are watching that haven't come across you before or had the privilege to hear you talk before, bit of background about you and why you're wearing a helmet would be a great place to start, methinks.
Why I have to wear the helmet and where I have to wear the mask is because I was doxxed by the Russians and the Chinese, and it did not end very well, and when I got doxxed a couple of years back, I had to change my address, my phone number, I had to move. It was very, very bad because, when a nation state actually comes for you, it is not a very, very fun event because they tried to, they tried to dox me, my wife, my cat, my dog. They went after my parents' credit rating, credit scores. Everything and any information they could get on me, they tried to use as compromise to get me to turn on the federal government and give up top secret information. And the answer to that was, fuck you. I'm not going to do that. And my handler at the time found out that they had put out a red notice on me from Interpol to have me arrested and deported back to China to face charges in their government that I had been hacking their infrastructure, illegally and stealing information on their water treatment facilities, nuclear power grid, and so forth, and giving it to the federal government, which I was not. So there you go. And it was a very, very, very testing situation for my wife and my child and myself because, where we were living at, the federal government said, you have to move. These people might show up to your door with guns and kill you. So we had to go. And we had to go basically underground, and we're under protective services for about 5 years, while I was actually working with the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and the U.S. Department of Energy, and I was a fellow with DARPA at the time, and, was writing white papers and found out that, when the Chinese actually hacked the Department of Defense and what was called DISA, the Department of Information Security Assurance, OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, and the government just loves these fucking acronyms, got stolen, and my white papers and some of my data got leaked onto the internet. And there
Oh,
were a
wow.
ton of people that, had lost at that time a lot of information, personal information, social security numbers, where they lived, what operations they were working on, just got publicly released onto the internet, and China soaked all that up and used that also with the Russians as well. And they almost got to what they call the knock list, which is the top secret list of spies that are actually working in foreign countries. So it was a very, very bad day for the government at that time, and when that hack actually happened, was not even less than 4 weeks later. I started seeing things pop up on my credit and so forth. So, knowing that China has really good facial recognition software and so forth, that's the reason why I have to kind of hide my identity. The government's done a pretty good job, of hiding my identity, and some of the pictures that you even see, even that are still on fucking Google, are so old. I don't even look that way anymore because I have a voice for radio, but not for television. So,
Well, we wouldn't want to offend anyone. It looks like someone's offended with me vaping on the live interview as well. So sorry if I've caused you any offense with that.
well, I have no problem with it. And if you don't like it, you can always change the fucking channel,
Well,
as I
there
tell
is that. I
people.
wasn't going to be that rude, but no, it's a non-nicotine based vape. So for any children watching out there, this isn't big, it isn't clever, but it's better
Oh,
than me
well.
smoking 20 cigarettes a day. That's
See,
why.
I'm at the point in my life where I have the level of you can just kiss my ass that I just don't care anymore, So I'm just at that point, the ability to say fuck it, I mean that's just I don't care. Your lungs, not mine, And in the United States, I guess they have in the UK, we have enough, Karens and Kevins out there that are just waiting to be offended about anything. That my ability to go, I don't give a shit and fuck you. The world does not bend around you. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I mean, my ability to give zero fucks and shits is at 0 point right now. Actually, it's in the negative, I think, at this point.
Well, look, before
So,
before we go completely off track and start offending everyone who's watching, which is the last thing that any of us want to do, especially now that we've got a sponsor, I don't want to upset them either.
oh,
Let
well, oh no, I, don't want to make the people that give the money, don't want to make them
let's
mad. I mean,
let's focus on hacking critical infrastructure. So I'm going to throw this over to you to start, and I'm going to encourage everyone watching to drop your questions in the chat. Oh, look, Stuart's
sure.
already done that, but you carry on, please, Chip.
So one of the main things that we, you and I've talked about in the past is the dealing with critical infrastructure, or OT, operational technology. So let's just go ahead and get the definitions out of the way. You have information technology, which is your servers, your laptops, your cloud, physical hardware and devices. That is IT infrastructure. OT infrastructure is the stuff that you don't think about, like your lights, your power, your water, your sewage treatment facilities. That is what OT technology is. And they use SCADA based systems, which is, very simple little bitty dump boxes that are no bigger than, a lunch box, or no bigger than a shoebox, some of them, that you program, called PLCs. And once you program these things, into these PLCs, into these SCADA-based devices, these are the things that basically work like, as I say, the Amazon arm that pushes a box off. Box comes through, down the line, oh, it reads the barcode. That arm a million times pushes that box off, whether it be, USPS, DHL, Royal Mail, wherever it needs to go. So that's what that device does. It tells that automatic arm to push that box off to the right location for where a box needs to be mailed. Okay. These devices are made by tons of different manufacturers, and they are throughout everything from, our nuclear power plants down to our water, treatment facilities, down to our electrical grid, so forth. And if you think about a warehouse, it's where I learned and I kind of cut my teeth in OT technology. We had thousands of them, that are everywhere, that are just, I mean, they're installed on everything. And you never really think about this technology, which is kind of the world underneath the world that we live in. You don't think about stoplights, like where's the power coming from to your house until it goes out, until you lose your water, until the power goes off and you have a rolling blackout. I mean, that is when, things really get bad, because guess what? Your food starts going bad. You can't go to the bathroom, and people get very feral, within about 3 to 5 days of not having, these things happen. And we see this a lot during, for example, when we have some kind of disaster, either a hurricane, tornadoes, so forth, what's the first thing that we want to do? Get the power back up. That's something that we see naturally. Okay. We also see, in my world that I work in, we also see, people that attack the power grid, that attack water treatment facilities, that attack nuclear reactors, that have nuclear power hooked into them. The United States has 52 nuclear reactors that most people don't even think about, that that are around the United States, that basically generate power. Same thing with dams. Dams produce hydroelectrical power that are throughout the United States, and we have thousands of them. Same thing as we have, these huge, gigantic, people drive by them here on our interstate system and don't think, oh, over there's a bunch of high, power voltage lines that go into a step down, and it's got these weird looking devices and everything, but that gives power to a generalized area, of over maybe 30,000 people, and we've seen everything in our country from domestic terrorism, shooting at these things, or using bombs or drones to drop bombs on these things that blow these, power step down facilities or secondary facilities down, that take out the power to 30,000 people. So there's been tons and tons and tons of different events that we've had over the past 4 years, and it's going to get worse. We have an election coming up, in the next year, and we've are looking at in the government, and especially with the people that I work with and some of the contracts that I work with, is to look at domestic terrorism, and cyber terrorism to go through the roof, especially for operational technology,
Yeah.
because these things don't just affect one person or one service; these affect multiple different things. Because people don't think about trains, planes, automobiles. They don't think about all of the stuff that's connected with this. So if I can affect transportation, water treatment, and power all at the same time, congratulations, I shut down a major city.
So without wanting to give people too many nightmares, when I was at Info Security Europe a few weeks back,
Hmm.
I met up with someone I know who works in the industry and is also involved with law enforcement on the cybersecurity side.
Right.
And they scared the absolute life out of me. So we were talking about all the activities, sort of prodding activities we'd seen on the telecoms companies in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks in the UK here.
Hmm.
If you look back through the news, you'll see that most of them have been hit by some form of attack. And I said to him, do you think this is them getting ready to gain access for when they need to do something, something bigger? His response was, they've already got access.
Right.
and and they're just sitting there waiting, which
So let
meant
me
I
give
didn't
you
sleep that night very
yeah,
well.
let me give you a world's first here. I in my test lab that you kind of see over here, I have a lot of test simulation that I can do on systems, and especially based around certain vendors. I'm not going to name the vendors. I'm not going to name the ones that I actually pen tested for this, but we had been seeing on my side of the fence in the government world, and for some of the contracts I have, a lot of their stuff being, pinpricked, hit here, hit there, all the stuff is getting hit. And, it's kind of like, a little, almost like a red teaming event that's being done. And now we've seen this being done by certain, threat actor countries, what I call the dirty 30 countries, that are hitting these defenses and these systems. And it really kind of scared me. And I was kind of going, I'm starting to see these things being used for pattern based learning and adaptive based learning in AI. So, we always talk about how AI is a threat, how we talk about, how big data can affect us, in certain different ways. So, what I did was, and this was one of the first things, and I'm still waiting for the government to give me a call so I can tell them how I did it, but I was able to take certain CVEs and certain vulnerabilities in certain vendor based systems that are known, not unknown, stuff that they actually publish on the internet. I put that into a Python code in a Python script, that I script kiddied kind of together, Nothing really major. I use Chat GPT, and Bark to actually clean up the code. And if you know the questions to ask Chat GPT in some of these open API systems, it'll make the code for you. It'll help you write the stuff. So I took a couple days, with a friend who is actually kind of like my partner that double checks everything. And we set this all together. And what we did was we also used Open API and we used open source coding to do this and wrote, a virus and a malware that would say, okay, be adaptive and plug into this. So if something doesn't work, rewrite the code in real time so that it would start working to attack that system. So we created a simulated system that was just a water treatment facility, very simple water pumps, so forth. And we wanted them to go to steam boilers. Steam, is a lot of the byproduct that actually powers the turbines for a water treatment facility. That code was not only able to bypass the firewall, it was also able to use adaptive based learning in a north, south, east, west bi-directional attack to be able to attack that system, and we were able to shut it off within 15 minutes.
Wow.
And that was using open source tools, open source code, open API, based on a very small laptop that I'm using over here to generate a real threat vector attack in real time with adaptive based learning.
That's terrifying.
5 days. 5 days. Now, my thought was if I could do this, on a homebrewed system that I created virtually, how can we test it in the real? Well, you don't want to test it in the real because if you do, you're taking out a city or you're taking out a county or a principality or, like in your case, some villages, or territories that might be affected by this. So in virtual simulation in lab, it worked perfectly fine. Now, in the real world, would we look at stop gaps and stuff that would hopefully be able to stop it? Yes. But, I've got to write all this up and, it's going to take a couple weeks and I have to kind of put in the flow process of how that I want to be able to do this to turn it into a white paper. Because the systems, I use their own known vulnerabilities that were out there. I didn't create anything new. I used what was existing and what was free. Now, if you think of a nation state or if you think of another country that could do this in real time with supercomputers, for example, we use a high performance computer that would be able to do this in, multiple different layers, multiple different attacks, multiple different adaptive learnings, and we're talking almost, at real time speed to be able to do this. So are the bad guys doing this? Possibly. Are we doing it? Absolutely. So it's a tit for tat warfare, as I tell people, and you're only as good as your infrastructure is. And a lot of our stuff is about 30 years old. We are taking very big strides here in the United States, under the current administration. And that's because I'm be political. I fucking blame all of them. I blame all the politicians and all the governments. They've had 30 years to fix this shit and they ain't done it yet. But now it's a big deal.
Because every 4 years someone else comes in and undoes everything
That's right.
that the previous.
Yeah, we pass the buck to the next person. Pass the buck to the next person. Yeah, maybe we'll get around to it.
It's not just the US though, Chip. It's no different here, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, it took 30 years for us to get healthcare,
Yeah.
in a sense, centralized and helped, and be able to help out with it. I mean, I know it's not just, the United States. I know it's not just the UK or whatnot. When you think about, infrastructure and power and all this, it's really not sexy. It's not like a really, current event until the shit turns off, and the problem with that is on the 4th of July was the hottest day ever recorded in the world. That's across the planet. Okay. Same thing now. We have had over 100-degree temperatures in the Midwest and in the desert areas of the United States. And their power grid is at the brink. It's at the highest use case ever. So it's just a matter of time before you have rolling blackouts. It's just a matter of time before either it's going to work correctly doing what it's supposed to do, or it's going to fucking melt down like a damn icicle because, it's just so old. It can't adapt to the ability to be able to give that much power and cooling and output of energy based on the use case of how old it is. So under the current administration, there's a very big push to be able to get these things actually fixed within the next 5 to 10 years. That's roads, bridges, trains, planes, automobiles. I mean, we're having enough problems with our airports because we don't have enough controllers, to be
Yeah.
able to do these things, because it takes 3 to 5 years to train somebody not how to crash a plane into the fucking ground, or slam them into each other in the midair. So, hey, that's kind of a good thing to make sure that these people
Quite
actually know what they're
important.
doing,
Quite
so
important. Yeah.
yeah.
Let's grab some questions. There's a couple in here. I'll frame the first one because Kerry's asked a question about getting into OT. We always hear, OT isn't something you see people trying to break into much in
Right.
cybersecurity. So I want to dig into that a little bit. I suppose the question is that because there are no entry level roles in OT, or is it another reason?
It's okay. So, for example, in the IT world, there's a clear, definite path that you want to go into. Like, I want to be a SOC engineer, or I want to be a database administrator, or I want to work in cloud engineering, or I want to be a developer. In OT, it's completely different. I mean, it's a completely different path because you have to know a little bit of electronics, and you also have to know about what specialty field that you're going into. So, a lot of people in our industry is dying off slowly, very slowly.
You mean the OT side of it, you mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the
Are you,
IT
are you
world,
talking about dying off as in people who know what they're doing with the old technology are dying off
there
as
you
in retiring?
go.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're aging out. I call them the dirty old wizard syndrome. They're the dirty old wizards that look like fucking Gandalf, and they've been around forever and they've been doing this 20, 30 years. Well, they're retiring now. They're
Yeah.
leaving the industry. And you've got to find somebody that has got a security background, that works a little bit with electronics, has got some little bit of electrical engineering or some kind of water treatment in their background, and then get them to go into quote unquote OT technology and services. So, you've got to, as I tell people, and it's very, very hard to break into this, is like, I was a maintenance technician, then I became a line technician. Then I became somebody that worked with OT and SCADA based systems. That's where I kind of really cut my teeth on having to replace these things and wire them up, and stuff like that. But the good news is there's a lot of manufacturers like, that will actually bring you into a training program to train you. And also
Okay.
there are universities now, especially that are looking at here in the United States, breaking into OT cybersecurity because there's such a need. So if you look into, IT technology, we need, thousands and thousands of people, that are doing this, and that's fine. In the OT world, when it comes down to cybersecurity, we only have people in the hundreds, and that's a bigger need that we need
I
right
see
now, is
we've
because
got a comment there from I don't know whether how you pronounce your name, whether it's Jesus or Jesus. So apologies for the mispronunciation. Honeywell apparently are one of the firms that are out there doing
yeah,
that at the moment.
you got Honeywell, Bosch, there's Siemens, Schneider Electrical. There's tons of companies out there that will say, hey, since you got your degree in cybersecurity and you want to deal with OT cybersecurity, come on in, and we'll kind of bring you in and train you to be able to do that.
It's interesting.
A lot of major universities now are finally stepping up and saying, you know what, there is a huge need for this. So people that are electrical engineers, or people that are going into cybersecurity and stuff, to say, hey, there's more than just OT. There's OT out there as well as IT out there. Which way do
Yeah.
you want to kind of go? Because OT pays you starting out at six figures. I mean, you start out at a very high salary rate, to where in IT you got to kind of gradually get yourself up to that rate.
Does that mean you because you have to come in at a higher competency level, a higher knowledge level? I mean, I see another
That is
comment in
correct.
there.
You
Joshua
have to come
Herdman.
in at a, yeah. I mean, it's you literally have to think like a bad guy. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like being a red teamer on crack.
Yeah.
You've got to really think of evil shit
I
all day
think
long.
Joshua's comment is that it's a multi-factor role.
It is.
You need to know physical, technical, and the cyber, which I
That
suppose
is
is
absolutely 1000%
yeah.
correct, sir.
And
Is
that is a bit of a unicorn out there in the job market, I would argue.
Yes, I mean it is, because you got to know how servers work, you got to know how networking works and topology works, for IPs and schemas and stuff that I deal with every day. And you've got to know tool packages, that are specialized towards OT, which is Clarity, Nuzomi that's out there. There's tons of different vendors out there that offer that kind of software and knowledge into OT systems, but it's very hard to get your hands on them. And now you're starting to see, because there is a national push by CISA and government entities here in the United States to be able to say, hey, we need to secure OT technology just like we do IT technology.
Yeah.
And that is a huge push right now in the educational market and training and certification world to get people OT trained, because you've got companies that are just giving up thousands of dollars in entry level fees to bring
Yeah.
people in to be able to do this stuff that these older generational people have been doing for 30 years.
Yeah.
And also you're dealing with government. A lot of this is highly regulated by government, and this stuff moves like a fucking iceberg on a damn ice shelf slow. I mean, government does not get in a fucking rush, and
No.
especially when you're dealing with state and federal governments that if you work for, like I do, it takes, you know, uh, weeks sometimes to get things to happen, because you've got so much coordination, so much paperwork, so many people that are being able to do these things, because you're not affecting just one person. You're affecting hundreds of thousands of people at a time, you know, and it's very dangerous, because guess what? OT kills people. If things go wrong, people might die.
Well,
And some people
let's
don't want
talk
that
about that then.
responsibility.
So I've got a couple of questions written down here that I want to get your thoughts and feelings on. So
Sure.
for someone living in old Blighty on a little island in the middle of fucking nowhere, we are very reliant on undersea cables for one,
Right.
for our communications with the rest of the world effectively. And living in a rural, remote location, I am 100% dependent upon Starlink satellite technology for me to be able to do these live streams. So,
Right.
a couple of things. One, there was something in the paper about Russia launching something up into the atmosphere that they were concerned about that could be to do with tampering with satellites. So that's the one concern. And the second concern is obviously the activity we've seen around the North Sea, especially with the spy vessels from the Russian fleet near where
Correct.
our undersea cables are. I mean, for me, you said it earlier, 3 days of services not working, anarchy kicks off, right? There's no
Absolutely.
fresh food in the shops, the transportation systems are down. But just talk to me and explain to me the dangers of losing those communication channels, whether it be satellite or whether it be cable.
So let me give you an instance here that happened in the United States that's based around the same thing. Okay. You have a facility, and I'm going to use a hospital as example here, right? So, and this is very true because I was there. I was there when it happened, and I was there when I had to fix it. And I was there that watched the fallout that actually happened from this. So this is a true situation. This is a true story, because I was there when these things went down. I was working with a facility that was a hospital, and they had just recovered from probably the worst events the hospital has ever seen. And I want to give you an example. Was that they lost power to their facility due to a natural disaster, and within that they lost the ability to communicate, from what they call in the hospital, they call it the main wall.
Yeah,
And there's oxygen and electricity and life-saving devices that have to have electricity to be able to supply to these instruments that keep a human being alive. So their ICU went completely offline, and then their NICU went offline. So that means that babies are dying, and you've got critically ill patients that are actually dying at the same time. The other thing, though, too, was the water was actually cut off, so their sprinkler system actually malfunctioned, and it turned on, and it started filling facilities throughout the entire hospital, which was a 26 story tall building, full of water. And then guess what? They basically, their doors started to malfunction. Once their doors started to malfunction and start locking on them, that means they could only use the main stairwell to start evacuating patients at that time.
my
So
goodness.
you've got 2,000 patients that are in this hospital, and they go down to basically the ER. or they have to, because that's the main door that stays open, is out of the emergency room to get these people out. So you got 2,000 people that are squeezed now, babies, including patients that are dying and in wheelchairs and so forth. They've got to go down 26 flights of stairs, or if not more, to get down to the main ER to be evacuated. And they have no EMR system and no power. So that means they can't track the records. They can't track, what the patient's taking and what they're doing. And in the United States, it's called a triage
Yeah.
situation. That's when the doctors get to decide who lives, who dies, who
Yeah.
gets the services first. So we either have to evacuate them to another facility to be able to give them, life caring services, or evacuate them via helicopter one by one because they're stuck. Because guess what? This happened exactly when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, because I was sent down there to get this hospital online that was experiencing all of those things. So we roughly had, out of those 2,000 something people, I'm not going to tell you how many that died, but it was a lot, because the doctors had to decide, because they are now on paper. They're having to work via paper. No computers, no nothing, to figure out who and whom they can save, and then who and whom they can let die.
And you think that's in one location where the hurricane hit? Imagine if that happened nationally.
That's right. So you think about if the East Coast or the West Coast in the United States went completely offline, or the central United States that's in the middle of a heat wave, they have absolutely no air conditioning. The
Yeah.
bodies will start stacking up. And then when that happens, that's when the populace will start understanding that OT is one of the number one life giving things that they have to have. Next to power and communication, there's internet.
Yeah.
You
Well,
take
that
away,
leads me on to the next point, actually.
that's right.
So, financial transactions. If
Right.
those cables were cut undersea, banking would stop. Am I right in thinking that?
Right.
You're not going to, yeah.
You're watching the British pound start falling down like a rock going down to the bottom of the ocean floor, my
That'd be
friend.
good.
Because
That'd be good for me at the moment. It's a little bit too high for me versus the
yeah,
dollar, but
I
not
mean
too
you're
low.
talking about debt records that would eventually go down to zero.
Yeah,
So everybody would be on the same playing field. But the unfortunate part of that, though, too, is the inflation in your money has absolutely no value. So
yeah,
you go from one of something to zero of something.
yeah.
And that means that the paper that King Charles is about to be printed on ain't worth shit.
I need
And
to get
then
my
guess what?
vegetable garden in order, I think.
That's right. So guess what? Your pound turns into pound of nothing.
I
So
think
the
that's,
deep
I
sea
think that's the
cable,
way it's going anyway, Chip. Really,
yeah. I
at the
mean,
moment.
as I tell people, the deep sea cables are otherwise known as the MAC cables. These cables are what connect your island nation to the world. And Russia, and you've got geopolitical states that want to know exactly where those are. So if there is a situation to where they want to be able to inflict major amounts of pain onto a nation, they can just cut them off completely. No different than cutting, a piece of cable with, scissors. If they destroy that, like they've destroyed pipelines in the past, the Russian syndicate, and that's how I put it, because they're not run by Putin. They're run by a bunch of oligarchs. If they decide they want to turn the gas off to certain nations, they could, and now we're starting to see them do that. And now some of these states are going, whoa, 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 okay, wait a minute. We'll take some of that back because we've got to have your resources coming in. Now countries are starting to wise up, going, well, if we can't fucking trust those guys, we got to rely on ourselves. So now we've got to start putting, investment dollars into infrastructure to keep our populace warm, or, certain gas coming through, or certain power coming through. So these are some of the things that, countries now are really looking at, going, man, we've got to invest in this stuff. And that means we got to invest in people that need to get into this industry, to get into this. Because, I mean, you can make a lot of money and have a good, stable life and have a good, stable career, because guess what? This is not going away. Not anytime soon,
No, and also you've got to think about the remediation time on fixing this. So Jack Hewitt, thanks for jumping in the chat, and a very relevant comment about the broken cable north of Alaska right now. And I'm going to
Right.
drop in, I'm going to drop in the chat the quote I've just seen in the news about that. This will be a long-term outage. We're talking about 6 to 8 week turnaround time for the ship to mobilize and the ice to clear out of the region. But that's the current situation. So we've got I don't know how many residents living in those villages and towns there at the moment with no internet capabilities at all. And it's going to be the same for 2 months. Scary, really.
So
And
imagine
that,
if I started at the top of Maine and went all the way down to the coast of Florida.
well, that goes
And
back to this question, right? That
yeah,
came in right at the start. Are we too reliant on tech? Paper, cup, and string for the win, I reckon.
well, we live in the biggest glass house in the United States. We have used the internet to the nth degree. That was one of the things that we have done. Now, there is a light at the end of the tunnel for this. Um, if you look at Lights Out, that was written by David Brinkley, if you look at the sandworm attack and the black energy attack that actually happened, most of our stuff can still be manually hand turned. It's not 100% internet enabled, in other words.
Okay.
So, in other words, if a valve goes off, that means that there is someone that can go and turn that valve back on. Okay. It does get a little bit more testy and scarier depending on the modernization of how you want to do these things. These things, SCADA based systems, to be honest, were not meant to be integrated into the internet, and they did not have internet security or security protocols baked into them.
Yeah.
They're a terminal. That's what they are. Terminals don't have two-factor authentication. Terminals don't have, sometimes password authentication. Some of them are really called dummy dump controllers. So as long as you see the IP address and you can putty and remote into it, congratulations, you got access to it. So it depends. It's very susceptible on what the actual infrastructure is, and then what it's actually doing, and then how you would be able to affect it. And the thing is, these laws have been on the books for a while now. We just haven't really got around to it because it's a green paper problem. You're going to see this in the industry a lot. And I will not lie to you. I will not lie to anybody that comes into OT. OT is very expensive. It is a green paper problem. These things take time and buku's amount of money to change.
Is it? I mean, there's this comment here from again, if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Jesus, I apologise, but he's put that from his CISA 301 instructors, some manufacturers are implementing things that interact with the cloud.
Fuck all that. That is some bullshit. There is no way in
You heard it here
hell I
first.
am going to
Fuck all
let,
that.
yeah, Jeff Bezos tell me about my water treatment facility. There's no way I'm going to let Amazon or Microsoft or fuck all that shit. Ain't no way I'm going to plug all that in there. If they want to take the risk and the vulnerabilities that go with it, good luck. That's
Yeah,
all I got to say. But
that's what he said. Apparently, yeah.
that is probably one of the worst
If there's one
ideas I've.
type of technology that needs to be isolated, I would argue it's critical
Yes, I
infrastructure.
mean this stuff needs to be air gapped and isolated because there has to be. IT and OT was never meant to touch each other. They were never meant to meld together. You got IT systems that are over here and OT systems over here, and the biblical rule is they never touch each other. You want them so air gapped it's not even a joke. Because when they do, fuckery begins, and that's when the bad things start to happen.
Yeah,
And you could talk to anybody that's worked in OT, especially water treatment facilities. Water treatment facilities are a very sexy target for, hackers to be able to hit, or hacking groups or nation states to hit, because first off, they're 30-year-old technology. Two, they're very Doric and they've never changed. Three, they all use the same manufacturers, which is just bad within itself. And then four, they've connected them all to the internet to be monitored, controlled, and maintained. The fifth and the final thing, though, too, is we have a lot of examples of water treatment facilities going offline, or chemicals getting dumped into them that's way
yeah, I've
too
seen that.
much that can affect people and cause them to get sick or possibly die. Like,
Yeah,
for example, ethanol and chlorine. If I dump a ton of that into the water system, now I've done poisoned a fuck ton of people,
yeah.
So it's very creepy. It's very
And
scary.
are those chemical levels controlled by computer then? Are they hackable?
100%. They
Yeah.
are all those sensors and everything are 100% controlled by, guess what? Computers, not by human hands. So the
Saying
only
that,
thing they
last time I was in Florida, no, I wasn't in Florida. I
it
was
was in
in
Florida when this happened.
No, I was thinking about what I saw on an advert on TV. Where was I? Virginia. All
Mhm.
I saw in Virginia were lawyer adverts for people who've been drinking the local tap water for the last 30 years. The fact that they could have a claim, apparently.
Right. Yeah.
That's worrying.
And I mean, we still have, for, in the United States, whether we want to admit it or not, has had its first Chernobyl like event. We had two trains that basically left the tracks, flipped over, and the first thing they decided to do was to put more gas and chemicals on it to burn it out of existence, which has contaminated the soil for over 30 plus years. The EPA said, hey, guess what? There was nothing that affected the air, but the ground's basically 100% contaminated for at least 30 to 50 years. So they have to remove layers of dirt, through that area. And then you think about it. Do you want to drink from the tap water knowing that some of the most worst chemicals on God's planet that cause some of the worst tumors and cancer are, in your soil that will eventually seep into your groundwater? And do you trust that, water treatment facility to get them all out?
No.
I don't fucking think so. So your property values just went from here down to fucking nothing,
Will there be
because
any
the only thing you can do is
recompense?
move.
Will there be recompense for that? Do you think people will be compensated? They must be.
Possibly,
Yeah.
and I mean, everybody's lawyering up, because
Yeah.
guess what? When this happened in the United States and these two trains basically, derailed, and all of these chemicals, basically went out. You've got people that have got to treat it, right? So they might be able to sue, BSNF, and the other companies, and the CSA Rail. They're the ones that are responsible for all this because they overloaded the actual train and the train tracks that caused it, to flip over. And there's, the people that live in the community. So will there be reparations for that? It has to go through the courts. It's got to go through the process.
Yeah.
So maybe in 7 to 10 years you'll start seeing payouts. But during that 7 to 10 years, are you going to live in that area knowing that this has actually happened at your back door?
No.
No
Not.
way. I mean, the only way that you can do is sell your property and relocate to another location. And if you have that, if you even have that as an option.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? If you've got to wait all that time to be paid out, who has got that as an option? Let's be honest.
Right.
It's
So,
difficult.
the OT affects the real world at a level that people just don't think about. They don't think of all the things that I do. And it's like, they're like going, God, you're a scary person. I go, no, no, no. I am not a scary person. I'm a scared person when it comes down to dealing with OT technology, because I know what it can do.
What
And
is
I
it?
know what
What makes you okay? What makes you the most scared? Where's the biggest concern for you at the moment?
the biggest concern, first off, is in the United States, is our nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
Because if one of those blows, you're talking, Chernobyl like event. You're not going to be able to be within a certain given area and radius for thousands of years. Second off, though, too, is that we're not fixing it fast enough. Planes, trains, automobiles, and our interstate connections, but being able to harden, our internet, being able to harden which is communication. That's how I look
Yeah.
at it. Hardening our communications, hardening our water treatment, and power facilities, which is very big, and that takes a lot of time and money, because you just can't rip up one water treatment facility and plop another one in. You're talking about 5 to 7 years to completely build one, and the water treatment and the stuff that goes with it, and getting the chlorine and the ethanol and the piping redone and so forth before you turn one off and turn another one on. The example I give of that is Jackson, Mississippi. They haven't updated theirs in 30 years, and
Wow.
their water's 10 times worse than Flint, Michigan ever was. They've got to completely redo piping throughout the entire city. So, I mean, you're talking about repiping an entire city, and that's a lot of digging up stuff out of the ground and replacing it, and then putting in a new water treatment facility. That's at least $2 trillion. Trillion, not billion, $1 trillion
For one.
for one city. Now, you imagine having to do that throughout the United States in different states that have water problems, if not the same or worse in certain areas. So, that kind of gives you the lift and shift, as they say in the IT world, that you've got to do. You've got to completely flip your mindset that this is going to be a 5, 7, 10 year process, and this is going to cost buku's amount of money to be able to
Yeah.
do this. And is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Is there going to be a lot of things that are involved in this from an IT and OT perspective? You're damn right. I mean, it's no different than, an oil rig. You've got to know, I mean, if you're putting an oil rig in the ground in the UK, right? You got to look at environmental rights, where it's going to be. Is it going to touch anything on the ground? What happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? I mean, it's a checklist of things that you've got to be able to do, because a company like BP Oil or anybody else, they're not going to start drilling off the aisles, only unless they know that they're going to be able to get, their money,
Yeah.
out of the ground. And guess what? Every day that an oil rig is actually operating inside the ocean is $1 million a day. That is written
Wow.
on paper. That is given. So if they're out there for 30 days and they don't hit shit, that's $30 million that a company just lost, just in operational cost alone. That's not
So,
including salaries. That's not including, docking fees. I mean, so there's a big thing that goes into OT technology that a lot of people have to think of. You've got to keep that thing operating. No deal, same deal if you're over here in the United States, same thing if you're over here in the UK. There's a certain given cost that goes with these things to keep them up and operational, and it is very expensive.
so that it sounds to me, especially with what you said earlier about the government realizing there's a massive talent shortage in this area. It sounds like this could be a good area to focus on for people who want to break in, who've got some maybe electrical engineering background. People from those kind of backgrounds, I suppose, would slip in easier, would they, Chip?
Yeah, and same thing I tell people that are just getting into the industry. Like if you're just getting your CompTIA certifications and your first bit of certifications, look at OT technology. Go to your counselors. On the internet, which we never had during my day. There's
Yeah,
so many resources out there right now for you to go out and start looking for positions in OT technology and start talking about OT technology and why you want to get into it, and why is it such, I mean, you're starting off at 100K, in
yeah,
the industry. You're starting off at $100,000, 100K just to get, as an entry level person, Now I'm more of a senior level guy. I just had my work anniversary. I've been doing this now 28 years. I get paid very well for what it is that I do. But to get to my level to do what I do, it's taken years to
it
get there because
sounds like you don't. It sounds like you don't actually get to sleep though, Chip, because you're so
no, I
worried all the
really
time.
don't. I get about 4 hours a night, and I get paid to be paranoid, people. I mean, that is my job. That's what I do. My job is to think of all the evil shit that could happen with this before we implement it, and I've got, 5 people that I work with that have been doing this a long time, and they've worked in cybersecurity, and they've worked in OT, and they've dealt in transportation, they've dealt in communications, they've dealt in all these things, but they're veterans. They're like me, they're veterans doing this. But I tell people that really want to get into this, really look at the institutions of learning and talk to them, and say, look, I want to get into OT cybersecurity. Do you have a program or a path that I would be able to do that? Right? Talk to your manufacturers and say, look, I know I'm talking to a recruiter here that's trying to hire people. I really want to get into OT cybersecurity with you and your company. Do you offer something like that? Better yet, is there curriculum, that I can buy from Amazon or any of the book resellers online, and YouTube videos that I can take a look at? That's your research. That's where you really start. And you have to have a passion for this. I get phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, this went off online. What do I have to do? I mean, it's a 24/7, 365-day a year job because guess what? That's what people demand. If the power shut off from between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock, people would be so upset during the day.
Yeah,
I mean, right after lunch, you come back and your power's off for 5 hours. I mean, people get
not good.
pissed.
Yeah, they do.
They really
Hey,
do.
look,
So guess what? I mean, it's
we're
a 24-hour job.
we're just about out of time, and I want to ask you a curveball question at the end, which has got nothing to do with OT. I hope you don't
Oh,
mind.
I love
Um,
curveballs. Hit me. Hit me.
it's not
Fucking
that
hit me.
bad.
Come on.
Who's who's been your biggest inspiration? Doesn't have to be work related. It can be anything.
Well, I wrote a paper that I actually did at a convention. Is that everything I learned in cybersecurity I learned from comic books. And it's true. Everything that I've learned in cybersecurity I've learned from comic books. Everybody wants you to be the hero. Sometimes you have to be the villain. Sometimes you're the antagonist. Sometimes you're the protagonist. Of the conversation and how things are going. and I put a lot of bullet points into that of stuff that I've learned, and that, people ask me all the time, what comic book character that you relate to the most. And the comic book character that I relate to the most is Doctor Doom from the Marvel Universe. And the reason why I say that is Doctor Doom is consumed as an evil person, but he's trying to do good, right? He thinks of
Yeah.
evil things that he has to do. He just goes about sometimes the wrong way of doing it. But his is that, is it for the betterment of the good for the one or the good for the many? And he always chooses not necessarily the individual and bend to that individual's will. He actually looks at the best of the many, and he isolates that to how they're able to fix that problem, right? So, as the Fantastic Four does when they fight, Doctor Doom, as they've always done in the comic books, you're looking at a group mentality and the individuality of each individual person versus the individual and the ego of the one. And that's
Yeah.
always the fight that ends up happening, because I deal with the ideology of that I have to provide for the many, right? But I still have to remember that even out of that many, I am dealing with the one. There's one person out there that needs services, that needs help, that needs these things done for them, right? It's affecting many people, but guess what? It's still for the individual that we have to look at and work for.
Yeah, I love the comic book analogy. I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Chip. As always, it's been super interesting, super entertaining, and super X-rated as well,
Oh,
which is
man,
what I always like.
I aim to fucking please, so that's
Any
up.
any wise words before we wrap things up?
Well, thank you. So, first off, I like to thank your sponsors. And I'm glad that things have been going well with this, because I remember when you and I, it was just you and me doing this, and we had like
Yeah,
no one.
yeah.
And it is very good to see how this has grown due to your hard work and your effort, and I applaud that. And I always tell
Thank
people,
you.
it's like, look, if you're looking at something that's going to keep you, very intrigued, look at this podcast. Listen to
Oh,
this on
thank you.
your devices, whatnot, because you're going to learn something that you didn't learn before, because you're getting industry experts to tell you the truth, and it's not just some vendor sprawl talking about their new power word like AI this, and oh, we've got adaptive learning this, and we're zero trust this bullshit, which I as soon as I hear that, I kind of tune that out, because it's like, look, I didn't come to you, you came to me, and if you can't
Yeah.
provide me what I need, get the fuck off my damn, phone. I mean, that's how I am. Vendors hate me, because it's like, look, if I need you, I'll call you. You don't call me, I will contact you. And
I
and,
think I
and
think they get I think they're getting the message slowly, right? It's just it's we can, as long as we keep talking about it, it will make a difference. And Chip, those words
right,
really do mean a lot. And I see Prashant's made a comment in there as well, saying how grateful he is. It has been a tumultuous journey the last couple of years, but
right.
you've hit the nail on the head. I've got to speak to over 100 industry leaders and learn absolute tons. And the best thing about that, we've done it live so everyone else can learn about it as well. And I think,
Absolutely. And that's one of the continuing things that you have to do, is to
yeah,
weed out the real truth from the chaff. What
yeah,
are they using that are power words and vendor crap and blah 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 blah, double speak, versus what you need to be able to provide for you and your users. And you and your users need one thing: the truth and content. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to
what two
massage it
things?
because it pops
Yeah,
back up every now and then.
mine's
I
got
mean,
a
it
little
just, whoop, see,
handle.
yeah, yeah. There's not a handle on mine. Mine's spring
You can
activated.
always blow it like that.
Yeah,
You
and
need to.
it doesn't blow as much because I do smoke as well, but it has a tendency when things start going bad. Whoop, 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 let me put that down. We're on camera,
Well,
so
let's put those away. Let's thank
yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
Let's thank
It's been
everyone for tuning in as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Chip, it's been amazing. I can hear the dinner bell downstairs. My dinner's on the table, so I'm going to wrap things up. Wish you all an amazing weekend. And Chip, let's catch up again soon, my friend.
Thank you so very much, and thank you to the audience today for listening to me rant about these wonderful things that I deal about on a daily
It's
basis.
been awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Take care.